Okay, welcome to the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust meeting of Thursday, April 13th, 2023. It's 9 a.m. We're in Memorial Hall in Town Hall. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on Westborough TV. First order is approval of minutes, which we don't have, so we're going to skip that and go right to our agenda item, which is discussion of the request for proposal for Baylor Avenue status and timetable. With that, so basically the RFP was announced that it was going to be posted on May 3rd per law, and then it was posted on the 10th with the full RFP with a schedule among, other things. And really the timeline, if we want to just talk about that so everybody's aware, is that...
It was April 3rd was posted?
I'm sorry, April 3rd.
Sorry,
Did I say May?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I correct myself. Was May 3rd was the, I'm sorry, April 3rd was when the notice went out that it would be being posted, and then it actually was on April 10th. So the next step in the process is what's called the pre-submittal meeting and site walkthrough. And that's going to be at 10 a.m. here at Memorial Hall on May 3rd, 2023. At that point, any potential bidders, developers will have an opportunity to meet, ask questions, etc. After we've had the meeting here, we will then do a trip over to the house and allow people access to the property, and so that they can sort of get a lay of the land, if you will. Although it's easy enough for anybody to go over and take a look around at any time. With that, following May 3rd, the next point is any respondent questions and requests for supplemental information is due by the 18th of May at 4 p.m. So that would be if they have questions about, any of the issues in either the RFP or just in general about the property. We will respond to those questions no later than May 30th, 2023. And those will all be submitted and posted online, all the questions as well as the answers. And Saab Khan, who is our procurement officer here for the town, is facilitating this process. Been very, very helpful. Obviously, we will be responsible for answering the questions and providing information, more detailed information, but given that she has understands the procurement process, she's been very helpful so far. And finally, then on June 9th at 11 a.m., all the proposals are due to us by 11 a.m. Any questions on that timeline? As far as the since the pre-submittal meeting will be on May 3rd, which is before our next meeting, I plan to be here. We've also, Saab will be joining us. And I don't know if anybody else might be interested in doing either the meeting and or walkthrough. The walkthrough, I don't foresee, although people may be asking questions there, but actually I think it's best to defer unless they're all asking the same question, and we can sort of summarize it in our response. But basically, any questions should really be put in writing. I mean, we can refer, or we might, have information that's available online and can direct people there, but basically, we want to make sure that sort of people, in a rough way, are escorted, that, anything that's said as best as possible is heard by people, just so that there's no question about information flow going out to everyone fairly. So that's the real trick in doing that kind of site walk,
You don't need a
walkthrough.
quorum for that meeting.
No, it's not really a meeting, it's not an official meeting.
So we're not going to deliberate, you're just going to take questions and,
So for May 3rd,
yeah.
May 3rd.
we should post that session as a public meeting in
Right.
case 4 of us are here.
Okay.
The site.
Oh, in case, right, sure.
Okay.
So we'll post the meeting as.
No, open.
So although by law, evidently you don't have to, as long as it's unlocked, you don't need to.
Hey guys,
Hey, do it.
Hi,
sorry about that.
that's okay.
All right.
All right.
At least you're not a plumber who shows up.
So,
Yes.
we welcome Nancy Armitage, who just joined us. So anyhow, we're talking about May 3rd, which is the pre-submittal meeting here on the request for proposal for 3 Baylor Avenue, and the subsequent, following the meeting, the walkthrough. So as Alan just suggested, I will post that as a meeting, just if we have a quorum, we have the ability to have a discussion among ourselves or possible
Right.
deliberation
And-
if
And
needed.
then what we can do at the site visit, I plan to go to the site visit.
Yeah.
I can bring the computer, and if people have questions at the site visit, we just log them.
Okay,
Right. So
Yes.
that As they're walking around, if they have questions, or they need some, or they're asking for additional information,
yeah.
we'll simply log those, so we can
Right.
include it in our response.
We want to make sure that we're following all, appropriate procedures in, this process, this procurement process, but at the same time, we want to try to be as friendly, open, welcoming, and encouraging as possible, because the more bidders we get, the better off everyone is. So, any other questions on that? I make a note to post the May 3rd meeting as a regular, special meeting of ours. So post May 3rd meeting. Okay, and I can do that at any point, because I think it's just general questions here, and then followed by the visit. Okay. Any other questions on the RFP? I check my mail, quite often. I'm the one whose email is posted in the RFP. I haven't, no one's contacted me. I'm going to stop by after this meeting and check with Saab to see if she's received any contacts or questions. So, that's about it for that. You have anything, Alan, besides that?
No, a couple of other updates. We sent, I've done some outreach, as we discussed at the last meeting. So Habitat for Humanity is aware that we're posting. I will send a follow-up message to make sure they've seen the public notice with the link.
Yeah, they have,
To
that's
the-
good.
Excellent. I also reached out to some other housing trusts that have done buy, renovation, sell projects, just saying, hey, if you've worked with developers who might be interested in the project, please forward this information, as well as to CHAPA, MCO Housing, and a couple of other organizations. MCO Housing actually asked for the link, because this could be a project that they would take on.
Great.
And so, if folks know developers who might be interested in the project, point them our way. We're happy to have it. I'll say that, the RFP does, set an expectation about the affordable housing process, but knowing that, a developer who says, oh, wow, I can do a really good job building an affordable home, but I don't understand the affordable housing process, that the RFP is written, we are fine from an RFP standpoint. From a criteria standpoint, if they partner with an organization. So they could go to an MCO housing or the regional housing service office and contract with them to do the marketing piece and the compliance piece.
The compliance, right,
And
the
build that into the
lottery.
proposal. So it doesn't have to be someone who's got that ability in-house. That partnership is fine under it. So we want a good representation of folks who might be interested in taking this on.
Yep. And I know we've also reached out to some other, like Mass Housing Partnership
Yeah,
and a
Mass
few
Housing
others
Partnership
that,
is
you know,
aware of it.
just tried to spread it as widely as possible so that, you know, the more vocal we are in promoting this and informing people, hopefully the better response we get. So that's about it. All right, moving on, we're right on time. Just very, very quick, as people are aware, we are in a legal process with the development called the Residence at Westborough Station. We are at the point where the landlord for that development had gone to district court to try to bring it, if you will, escalate it from land court, where it had been filed, where we had filed an injunction. That was sent back down to land court, so we are back at land court. The town is pretty much running the show, if you will, on this. That's their responsibility. But, you know, we've been facilitating, supporting, et cetera. I don't know if you've heard anything more, Alan, as far as the status of the timetable when we might get a final decision from the land court.
The case at this point is, regardless of initial findings by the court, Northland wants to see this continue and defend their position. So the case is moving forward.
Has it been calendared yet, or
Um,
for they gotta have?
There's a due date for discovery and depositions,
Okay.
Oh, so they're in discovery, okay.
so, and it's, we'll,
This month, maybe, get
Yeah, I
next
think-
month or so, somewhat in that range.
yeah.
As, you know, is the case, there's,
I will not be surprised if some or all of us as trustees are asked,
Deposed.
are deposed on the case.
we just say what we've done, and that's it. I mean, we have provided all the papers, you know, like all the emails and any other documentation, you know, spreadsheets, things like that, that, you know, we've used or we have used, you know, during the initial process. So that's where we are. Okay, moving along. Rogers Road update.
Yep.
And maybe Hank?
Kate and I will be meeting tomorrow with Jill Dupre, who's on the board
Yep.
of the Housing Authority, to talk about getting the authority board support to form a little task force.
Right.
To basically take on the task of creating proposals for expanding the housing authority offerings at Rogers Road.
Okay.
And, you know, pending what comes out of that, you know, somewhere along the line in the next couple of months, we'll form a task force, we'll start working. Expectation is that we'll end up coming back to the trust, looking for some funding to hire a couple of consultants. We'll certainly need an engineering consultant to help us with site plan kinds of stuff.
Sure.
And engineering kinds of stuff, and we'll need a consultant to help us understand both the political and funding processes. You know, we'll need to model, part of what you'll have to do is model out, when you have some idea of what size project you might be able to fit on the lot, you have to model out how do you pay for it?
Sure.
Okay. And that's all very complicated. And then when you figure out how much it's going, you can model out the finances, then you got to go figure out how do you deal with the political structure and the legal structure and such to get the money
Correct.
to appropriately go. So there's quite a bit of work, and we'll look for a task force to drive that.
Right. But I think
It's moving.
that's the key
Not-
thing
not
is
fast, but
if
it's
we're
moving.
engaging in
Yeah.
I'll call it a more formal or more structured, if that's a good term, way, and I appreciate your time in trying to get this working group together. Appreciate that, and hopefully that will be the genesis of getting at least some rough project line down regarding, when some decisions can be made as far as with the housing authority. Obviously, we can respond as quickly as we need to, if we need to, but, getting a formal dialogue going, I appreciate that. The trust appreciates that, and the town does too. Some of the, you had some points that we had discussed. Was there anything you want to bring up regarding that property? You talked about home rule and things like that, or any, or also updates on the DEP and whether DPW has heard anything, Chris Payan,
So,
as far as the wastewater?
this really came out of the notes from the meeting with the Acton Housing Authority, which I found it fascinating that they got 2 home rule petitions, one to exempt 30A, which, for the public's benefit, is prevailing wage and
Yep.
municipal purchasing requirements. That effectively lowers the cost of development by anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2. And also, I wasn't sure if it was home rule petition or just an agreement with DHCD about local preference,
Yeah, which was surprised me also.
which is surprising that they were able to do it. The question that went through my mind was, what else could we potentially home rule petition? Unfortunately, wastewater allocation is not one of them. I did try to, I had conversations to say, can we get legislation that directs DEP to do it? And unfortunately, no, because DEP's wastewater permitting process is actually guided by federal law as well. And so, the current,
The
climate
hierarchies.
in Congress probably not
Yeah.
effective to spend our time and money trying to do that. But I think there are other options as the process is ongoing with the wastewater assessment. The more I learn about it, the more complicated it is. And that, there are properties that were formerly, there are properties in Westborough that aren't connected to wastewater that have rights to connect. That's part of their deed.
Right.
There are other, properties where homeowners called up and said, hey, if I ever want to do it, can I? And they were told yes.
Yep.
Some of that's in writing, some of it's not. So there's a whole assessment of what's in use versus what's committed, as far as coming up with the availability that's needed to even do the reallocation analysis. And so I'm not sure we're going to have an answer by the end of Q2, as we were sort of hoping. My sense is it's like an onion, that DEP says we need this, and you provide that information, and then like, okay, now given that information, we also need this.
And it makes you cry at the same
And it
time.
makes you cry. It makes you cry. I can tell you that from Director Payne's point of view and his team, there's nothing more that they would love to do than have a quick resolution to this.
So that we stop pestering them. No, they've been very, very good.
They see the need, right?
Yeah, and just like everybody else, they want to see
you know,
us.
that this is a
resolved.
significant issue, development issue for the community.
Mhm.
So that's moving forward. But I've actually had some conversations about, you know, creative solutions and what might be available for us to do. So I'll continue to explore those because they're,
Yeah, but
we
if
might have some
sewer, if
alternatives.
sewer ends up being the final constraint, you can always go private sewer. It's not a solution I would prefer, but it can be done.
It can be done with Rogers Road, given the proximity to wetlands and protected
Might be.
land. It could be, you know, it could be very difficult.
And it may limit the size of what could be done.
Yeah.
but
Even if it's doable, the flow amount, you know, which would be driven by the number of units.
Is private sewer like septic? That's what
Yeah.
I'm-
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but it
I mean,
sounds
you-
better.
you-
Yeah,
You couldn't do traditional septic, you'd have to put in a treatment plant, a treatment plant specifically for that facility.
Or you would need storage and removal.
Yeah,
You need-
that's another solution that
You know,
we,
that's, you know.
all of these
And there
solutions.
there have been developments in Massachusetts where they build the storage and removal system, and eventually they get the allocation and shut that down and connect.
Oh, I like that idea.
But again, everything you do that's not just connect to the pipe in the ground is more expensive.
Right, right.
And collect and remove is an operating cost
That's right.
that comes into the economic model.
Private sewer, if you will, tends to be very expensive.
It's either expensive to build and moderate to operate, or it's really expensive to operate.
It's a
So,
long-term operation, you can't,
Yeah.
to operate private sewer, you need high-skilled people, so you need someone like Viola to actually oversee it.
Oversee it.
yeah.
And so your ongoing costs are not cheap either.
Obviously, I assume the folks in Acton were not able to file the home rule petition until they were, if you will, well along in their design.
Correct.
And, you know, they said, we're ready to go, this is what we want to build, et cetera, so that it was real. And I don't know if they had already, you know, received some of the funding. They did get some DHCD funding, and at that point, proposed a home rule petition at town meeting. I think what would be appropriate for this on the separate home rule, which would be a preference for local.
Yeah, I guess I would ask, was the local preference part of the home rule petition, or
No, it was a
was
separate action.
a separate action
With a-
home rule, or
a,
was it just negotiated with DHCD?
It was negotiated somehow with DHCD.
Okay,
I
so-
didn't really get, I was surprised that it even could be done, because DHCD traditionally has been pretty strong about the local preference stuff, but
Right.
My thoughts would be the fact that Westborough has been very good and has a high percentage, higher than 10%, 13%, you know, might be to our benefit saying, you know, if there's a local preference, look, we've done our part in this
But
area.
also from what
Yeah.
from the notes and from what was said at the last meeting, an understanding that working with, that the director went into the state database and did research and was able to say, if we build these units, here's how many local residents
Right.
are already
On
on
the
the wait
list.
list
But it-
that would qualify for these units.
There's three, I mean, when we get a task force working on this, I would suggest three key steps. One is what I would call a needs assessment. You know, go pull some demographic data, go pull some waiting list data, that sort of thing. That says, what kind of need is there both in this community and in Worcester County?
Mhm.
Or whatever the appropriate geographical area
Yeah.
is, that you got data-driven needs assessment.
Yeah.
That shouldn't require a consultant, but it will require some legwork. You need, then you need to engage with some engineering folks to help you understand what's possible to fit on the site. And then, and when you get someone, between those two, you can make some, you can say, hey, this is what we'd like to build. At which point you can start doing financial modeling and get consultants to help you figure out, how do I go get this built? Where do I find the money? How do I get the political and community support, et cetera? But you got to do those first two steps before you go do step 3.
Right.
But and those 3 steps are probably a couple of years' work.
Yeah, no, understood. And so it'd be good to get, you meet with Mr. Dupree and get the task force rolling.
Yep.
And get started on the needs assessment. The other, I think that item that I think will help us is the town's senior needs assessment.
Yep. That
The
should help.
the draft report
Yep.
is due soon
Right.
and will be reviewed and then finalized. And so that should help.
Should provide a
Feeds
tremendous amount of
of data,
demographic data
right,
about the
right.
town's
And
requirements.
so,
and needs.
And
if it's okay with the trustees, I will ask the town manager for a copy of that.
Absolutely.
'Cause the process is, my understanding, the process is we're going to get a draft, and then the question is, looking at what they say, do we have any questions where we would like them to analyze the data a different way, or pull different out? So if there's anything that we say, well, gee, they got this information, but it'd be nice to have this, we may have an opportunity to go back and ask them, can you produce this piece of data
Right.
that we need? And then they'll see if the data set is sufficient enough to produce it.
And this is the group from
UMass.
UMass in Boston.
Yeah.
That's been doing interviews, et cetera. I was interviewed, I was in a group, well, with Tank, 'cause we were in the same group along with a couple of other folks, five of us, I believe.
They did a
So-
really great job in Wayland. I
Oh,
read some
did
of
you
their
see?
Wayland study, and it was really very well
Yeah.
done.
Okay.
And this is, and just a reminder that this, what isn't just about the senior center and the council on aging services, it's comprehensive
Right.
for the whole town, right? So that,
Right.
and, even, when Tommy was discussing this, Chief Purcell stood up and said, there's data that the fire department wants for emergency management plan, and an emergency management agency needs for planning.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to understand what even his department and their roles can be doing to better serve that population. And so it's really a broad spectrum, so it'll be good to get
I
that.
mean, one of the key things I think they do want, and they sort of preface some of the meetings, if you will, the little caucuses was, how do you keep people in town, seniors in town? That was, staying in Westborough was a
More pressure.
major question, consideration, desire, et cetera. And I know that's everybody's desire. We'd like to age out, if you will, especially some of us in the red zone, as we might say. Hank, no. Okay, good. Anything else on the Rogers Road? Otherwise, we're well on our timing. Alan, you had brought up, and I wanted to continue discussion and see what next things we may want to do with the first-time buyer program. We had looked at a couple of different models, in prior meeting to see what we can do to use the One Boston model
Yeah.
or with MHP, and I think, were you
So-
going to reach out to MHP?
Yeah, so I've had some conversations with MHP.
Okay.
MHP would love to be an active participant in this
Okay.
as a pilot.
Great.
However, the expansion of the program in Boston and ARPA funds that were allocated to MHP for this same purpose, they have a program up and running in somewhere between 12 and 20 gateway cities
Yes.
that they're managing. So bandwidth-wise, resource-wise, they really can't actively participate with us in this. However, what they did say is other trusts and other nonprofits have done first-time homebuyer programs, and they simply say, qualification for the one mortgage is a prerequisite.
Yep.
And MHP is fine with using that, us using that as a requirement for qualification.
Okay, so that's the qualification for the one
The
mortgage.
one mortgage program.
As far as AMI and first time.
Well, so someone would have to go through the process of qualifying for the one mortgage or be in process before they approached us.
Right.
And our approval of any assistance would be contingent on one mortgage approval. We can indicate what the level of assistance would be.
Yeah.
Then it's up to the one mortgage, it's up to the lender managing that loan for the one
Right.
mortgage program, whether or not they consider our contribution as part of the requirement or not. And so there's a little bit of chicken and egg that happens, but it's easily managed.
Where is the information as far as the qualifications for the one mortgage?
Online.
I know, but is it-
MHP.net and just look at the one. mortgage program.
MHP?
Yeah.
Yeah,
MHP
okay.
one-
So it's under MHP. I
There's-
didn't know if it was there
There's,
or
There-
DHCD.
There's a sliding scale of income requirement.
Yep.
And there's actually an education requirement. So MHP offers a course for first-time homebuyers, which is not just about the home buying process, but about budget and maintenance and.
I could use that right now.
and
And
it's-
there's also financial models in there. You can,
Yeah.
you can plug numbers into the financial model to find out whether or not you come close to qualifying, so.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's a
It's a
great
pretty nice
resource.
system. I've played with it.
So we can, the one piece of feedback we did receive on our models is that we talked about down payment assistance or paying down points.
Points. Yep.
Down payment assistance is the easiest. It's the smoothest, because if you think about the timing of everything that has to happen when you buy a property, it's really hard for a third party to pay down points, just logistically.
Yeah.
Because that gets, the way points are written into the mortgage proposals and contracts and the legal aspect of the disclosure statements is very different than the down payment, right? The down payment can go up and down much more easily
And also this.
than the interest rate on the loan.
Right. And we had said that this would be subordinated.
Right, it'd be either a grant or as,
Either, well, if it's
Or
a grant, then it's a grant. If it's a
No, and we-
loan, then it's
and we
subordinated.
still have some exploration to do, decide which way or how much of each way we want to go with that.
Right. And it could be a blend, too.
So that's the, general public side of the program. For the employee side of the program, we had questions about, well, how many folks who work for the town might qualify. So I did submit an information request to the town manager's office, to the finance and HR departments, to basically fill out a chart that says, at 50, 60, 80, 100, and 120% of AMI, how many employees fall into that income range, and do we know if it's, how many people in the household? Because AMI scales based on household size, right? So, and the goal there is to look and decide where we want to set the threshold.
Right. And it would also
on the town employee side.
be interesting to know, although I don't know if, I doubt the town has the level of detail of whether they own a home, whether they would be a first-time buyer or not.
Right. So on the employee side, it's less of a first-time buyer program than it is,
Is a facility, get them into town.
give them the opportunity to live in town.
Live in
if they
town.
want to.
Yeah.
There have been a few informal conversations with a few department heads who are like, yeah, that would be really a good thing. And there's still investigation that needs to be done. Even though we're independent, we are an agent of the town. And so however this would work needs to be done in a way that it can't be defined as a benefit.
Right. Otherwise, you're gonna
Because
need
if it's a
negotiations.
benefit, then it impacts union
Unions.
negotiations.
And if you want to pull it back, then you're going to.
Taxes and things of that nature, and we're doing a pilot, this is an initial, is this a good thing, will it have an impact? Pilot, If it ends up being declared a benefit, then stopping it becomes a real problem too. So if the program's not.
I do have, and it's probably maybe a year old, so I don't think it, it's still very relevant. I had asked for basically just zip codes of employees to get an idea of when we were doing, I think it was actually when we were doing our initial working paper
Yep.
prior to the
data's in paper.
vote to approve the setup of the trust. And I was able to get from the director of finance a dump, just here's the list of employees and just their zip code. So you were able, from that, to get an idea of how far away people are. Because obviously if somebody's living in an adjacent town, they may not be as interested in moving just, for commuting reasons or other reasons, but there may be people that are in, if you will, lower cost towns at distance that might be interested in getting closer
We know
to
if Rockland
town.
Trust-
So I do have that, and I can summarize some of that information for us.
I think Rockland Trust is the town's banker.
Yes.
Do we know if they're involved in the program in Boston at all? If they're one of the sponsors of the one-month mortgage?
I don't know if they're a one mortgage participant, but we can
Yeah, it'd
find
be
out.
great if they were, because then we could go, so at some point, we're gonna need to talk to a mortgage officer and say, hey, if we do this program,
Right.
Can you work-
will the banks buy in?
Yeah.
Because you eventually gotta get local banks to buy in and
Right.
accept the mortgages, right?
Yeah.
And if it's Rockland Trust, is such a nice match. If it's not Rockland Trust, we could try Avidia. They're kind
Yeah,
of a
I
local
mean,
bank.
we can get a list of lenders from MHP
Yeah.
as well and match them against a
Yeah.
local bank, so.
I'm pretty sure Avidia is a local lender. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah.
That's done one more.
And Rockland Trust now has an office in Westborough, so.
Oh, it does?
On Lyman Street.
That's
Yeah,
right.
they
They
took
took
They
us
took
right
over the
out.
Bank of
I can't,
America.
that place
Took over
changes
the
all the
old
time, I
Bank
tell
of
you.
America
The Bank of
office.
America office online.
I was hoping for an ice cream shop.
But it'd
Close
be
to my
be a lot
office.
easier to get a conversation with a very senior mortgage officer if you're, if the town's a
Sure.
client.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's right
Oh,
down
yeah.
the road.
All right, good. Anything else on that? I think, seems like we're taking steps along the line of, especially if you get the data, once we have that from, and understand the income levels, that could be helpful.
There is the one mortgage on Rockland Trust
There.
website.
Oh, okay.
So
Awesome.
they are familiar.
So they're a
Boy,
participant.
look at this. Talk about data-driven decision-making. It's a great key. All right, just on other business, we did have a really nice article in last Friday's
I saw it.
Advertiser.
Community Advocate that Maureen Sullivan had sat down about a month ago, I guess it was, with Alan, myself, and Hank, and did an interview about things that we've done. I gave her a copy of our regular report that, was published in the book, the annual report book, that's given out at town meeting. And then from that, plus discussions of where we're going. It was very, 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 quite lengthy, relatively lengthy and focused in, reasonable amount on Baylor Avenue. They had a picture of the Baylor Avenue property, et cetera.
They said it was demolished, though, that was.
But, yeah. But
No, it was
if we
more
wait long
surprising
enough,
me.
it may do it all by itself,
Yeah.
given the condition. Anyhow, but that was a minor issue. But, yeah, it was a very, very good article. And obviously, the more we can keep people informed, we had strong support at town meeting when we asked for the transfer of the, of the money, from the stabilization fund to the trust. A couple people spoke a bit against it, but it wasn't so much the financial aspect, which was just a given, you had to do it, as much as about affordable housing, which I think hopefully Alan and I, addressed, and just
I think
The-
you both did a great job. I was not able to be at town meeting because of the stomach virus going through my house. But I did watch you, and I thought you did a great job of talking about the need for affordable housing.
Right. There's definitely a need. When somebody said there wasn't a need, it's, you know, I just like went, whoa. Just look at, you know, if you look at list, if you look at the, you know, just talking with people, is, you know, there's definitely a need in this town. And you look at the cost of rentals in particular, as well as just house prices. And, you know, there's really no new, what I'll call starter homes being built, unless you want to call it, you know, a condo, you know, only because, you know, you might be able to get something in under 500,000 as a starter home.
That would be a
There's really
real
not
starter.
a lot of your traditional, like, post, you know, war, nice small lot, you know,
Little
home.
Cape house, those don't exist anymore. Yeah.
Say again?
Those little Cape houses.
Yeah,
they're-
exactly.
They don't exist
Expandable
anymore.
Cape.
Yeah, they've all been expanded.
Expansion attic, right?
Yeah, they've all been
Well, the
expanded.
price of land has, I think, driven developers to, you know, in order to get their money back, to build, you know, larger and larger
If I
single
remember the numbers,
residential.
the average single-family home in Westborough is somewhere around 730. It's in the,
Yeah, it's in the,
it's in the book that was handed out at
Oh,
town
6,
meeting,
7,
but it's
sorry.
yeah.
north
I
of
think
$700,000.
it's close to 700, yeah, that's the average.
Yeah.
So anyhow, the, with the, I just asked the finance director, just before we went to town meeting, make sure I had my numbers in line. With the passage of that 602,000 and change or so, we're at 2,200,000, and we had it at 600,000, $2,270,000 in the, you know, in the trust. And obviously that'll vary a bit. We did, the reason we had more than the 600 was just because of increase due to interests, because it is, any money, both in a stabilization fund and or in a trust, is managed as part of the total funds of the town, you know, the cash funds of the town. So they are invested in very safe instruments, but still we can get a little bit of return on them, which is good. That was a couple of the other business points.
I've got one other business, and apologies to the trustees for not looping everyone in. Back in January, February, we sent a request to Alma, the director of the senior center, and the Council on Aging about a chance to present. My bad, a couple weeks ago, I got a call from Alma, said, if I can fit you on the agenda in April, would you do it? And I said, sure. And that was getting sort of like in and out of the mind, right? So Monday morning, I got a reminder that I was on for 1 o'clock on Monday afternoon. So I just, amidst all the chaos that is my Mondays, put a small presentation together. And I did meet with the Council on Aging. The goal was to give an update of Rogers Road, where we were, how complex it is, and how we're going to need their support and broader community support as we work with the Housing Authority to move forward. I also mentioned that with the end of the eviction moratorium, that they often hear from seniors who are struggling to stay in their homes. And if they could, as they hear, you know, to share that information with us, that one of the things we are looking at is the concept of a regional housing office or a housing caseworker, and how we might help facilitate that with youth and family services, neighboring towns, nonprofits, whatever it might be to solve that problem. So having data and awareness of the scope of the issue is beneficial to us. And the meeting wasn't live streamed, but it's recorded and will be available by Westborough TV. It ended up a 10-minute update, ended up being close to 35-minute discussion with them. Some great questions about what's happening with affordable housing, we'll work with the trust and the broader issues around housing affordability in town, and how that impacts seniors.
I saw on Friday, because I was doing taxes for seniors down at the thing, and she says, yeah, Alan's coming in Monday. And I'm going, what? You know,
You should have called me, because then I would have known.
I would have given you a heads up, and I just figured,
And I apologize,
okay.
it's just one of those things that didn't make it on the calendar. and
I'll
it's not on the
assume
calendar, it doesn't
it's all
exist.
planned out, and, you know, it was sort of,
Feel free to
I just
check.
nodded, and I said, oh, yeah, good. And so I thank you for doing that.
And I was very grateful for the opportunity to share information and hear their questions and concerns, and highly engaged and aware of the issue and the need for action.
Thank you for
And
representing
I
us.
assured them that, you know, given all the obstacles and the challenges of moving forward on any project, clearly, we've already talked about wastewater being a scary one for us, that yes, we have money in the trust, and we actively are looking for ways to spend it, folks.
Yeah.
We're not just collecting money to hold on to it. Every month, we're working.
And what this does is, you know, I think having that kind of money, if we go to talk to anybody, you know, be it a bank, be it,
Right,
you know,
mortgages.
being a developer, things like that, you say, okay, you guys are serious about this. You know, it's not just pie in the sky thoughts, that, you know, you have money that can back you up, you know, your vision and individual projects. So, you know, that's all good. It gives us, if you will, some gravitas as we discuss, you know, projects with various entities. Okay. I think that's all I had. You know, obviously, as hopefully the RFP gets a response, we'll get a little busier. But appreciate everybody's work, and unless anybody has anything else under new business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion?
Seconded?
Okay, Kate?
Seconded.
Second,
Yeah.
okay. I was worried there, okay. All those in favor of adjourning?
Thank you,
Looks
Westborough
like
TV.
unanimous, and
Yes.
thank you,
Thank you.
Westborough TV.
Thank you, everyone, for waiting for me.